The things that has shocked me most about the regime media's coverage of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle this year is how a real scandal involving everything that the delusional Duke pretends to care about has just been covered up, just been ignored. This is the African Parks scandal, and it's at number 33 in our countdown of the worst of 2025. And it includes the bizarre moment that Harry went missing in Africa for 3 days, completely out of contact with his wife, Meghan Markle, and 3 children, in order to spend time with a woman described as a mother-like figure. This is how I revealed the news. Prince Harry went off-grid and was uncontactable during secret 3-day visit to Botswana. The newspaper reported, and this is Charlotte Griffiths, remember. After completing his work with landmine clearing Halo Trust charity in Angola, he is believed to have travelled to the neighbouring country of Botswana last weekend. There, he is thought to have met with a mother figure in his life who lives in southern Africa, called Tanya T.J. Jenkins. He calls her mom. She and her husband, Mike Holding, played a pivotal role in Harry's life for many years before he met Meghan. They were so important to him that he flew his future wife to introduce her to them within a month of meeting her in 2016. It is unusual for the Duke to spend so long away from the family home in Montecito, California without Meghan. Trips abroad without her usually involve a tight turnaround, with Harry jetting home after just 2 or 3 days. So, I mean, there's so much to go at here, Russell, so much to go at. Firstly, can we just discuss why the hell he was trying to escape his wife in Africa for all of these days?
I think that one we can understand. Being honest, I think we all know the answer to that one.
Chaps, surely the big surprise is that he only went for 3 days and not 3 months.
Or 3 years.
Yeah, indeed.
Say, I remember the story and I thought, hasn't Africa suffered enough?
Yeah.
If I'm being honest.
It's very, very odd. I mean, from a security perspective and so on, but also, yes. I mean, and obviously he was there originally to presumably emulate his mother's efforts when it came to landmine clearing. That was one of her things.
Yes.
You know, her 2 big things were landmine remnants almost from previous wars in Africa that were obviously blowing kids up, and obviously her AIDS charity work. So he's obviously there to emulate her. That, I suspect, has probably triggered something maybe in his small mind, and then decides, yes, to go off on some kind of sabbatical with the woman he actually calls mum. Apparently, he actually calls her mum, which is a bit strange. Maybe it was some kind of, I don't know, some kind of reset, some kind of spiritual distance that he perhaps wanted to speak about the woes of living with such a ghoul as Meghan Markle.
At what point do we start to consider that this guy's a threat to himself? Because, I mean, the entire saga of Prince Harry is quite depressing, really, because I remember when he was a bit of the nation's lad, he was happy, he was a bit happy-go-lucky and all that, and then he met that woman, and it all went downhill. And, yeah, it's sad, really. I view it as a sad moment because the way it's always all over the press and everything is understandable, but at some point you do feel like you're kind of picking on somebody that needs help.
But I know we shouldn't speculate too much here, really, but do we think that, you know, maybe he was having a real crisis in his mind and thinking maybe about leaving Meghan, and, you know, TJ Jenkins here, mum, has, you know, shaken some sense into him and said, no, don't do that, you know, for the sake of public appearance and the kids and so on. I mean, who knows? I mean, it does seem very, very odd to go off like that, though, doesn't it? And disappear out of contact for such a period of time.
Well, he's done it again, hasn't he? Where he knocked on somebody's door in the middle of London or something, if I remember rightly. That, you know, he has a tendency just to wander off, which I bet his security love it when he does that, particularly in Africa. But
well, next will have to be, of course, the man formerly known as Prince Andrew. Maybe we can get him to wander off for several months or even years in the Botswana wilderness.
Africa suffered enough?
I think it will soon be the man formerly known as Prince Harry. And that is the problem. That is what he's facing. And I think you're absolutely right, Russell, to say, of course, there has been a massive crisis of confidence this year. Numerous massive crises of confidence for Harry, because he realizes, holy shit, this is what I'm facing.
Maybe I want to get out of it.
Yeah.
Which is why I find it odd when he backed
so deep,
Andrew.
Peter.
Yeah, and I find it odd when he backed Andrew.
Well, they've got all that
I thought
jam.
the sensible thing would have been to back his dad and his brother.
They've got all that jam to sell.
That's true. Yeah.
Do that first.
They do, which is not helping matters. But then, of course, there's the more serious side, which is this African Parks scandal. And I mean, what I found so astonishing about that, especially the lack of mainstream media coverage around it, is that Harry has presented himself as this champion of African causes. And then the charity, of which he has been at the very, very top. I mean, in fact, in recent years, he's actually been promoted into a larger position at that charity, is accused of the most horrendous things, involving rape, involving abuse of the locals in Africa. And you just think, good Lord.
But unfortunately, I think that Harry and Meghan don't have good form when it comes to charities.
No.
And if you remember Archerwell a couple of years
yeah.
ago, when the accounts were filed, it became very, very clear that they were effectively taking money out of it. And the money that had actually been donated or devoted to good causes was a very, very small percentage of the amount
And
of
only
money.
spending, I think it was an hour a week.
An hour, and if that, an hour a month or something. Yeah. So maybe they see charities, I'm just speculating, as another form of PR. I suspect that's exactly what those charities mean to them.
Well, I think they do, Peter, but what's exploded in Prince Harry's face, of course, is that for many, many years, he was protected by the institution that he claims are so awful to him. It was actually the vile men in grey suits in the British royal family that were keeping both of his African charities, because remember, there's not just African Parks, there's also Centre Bali, which completely spontaneously sort of erupted this year in terms of that big row with Sophie Chandoka, who called out Harry for all of his bad behaviour. But the point being, Peter, for years and years and years, these charities ran totally perfectly because he had the oversight and the support of the British royal family. Since he's had to go it alone, they've been a complete disaster because all Harry is capable of doing is turning up, smiling for the cameras, shaking a few hands, and he has been exposed. And certainly his wife, who said that she could do all of this stuff for him, was lying. She has no idea how to run a charity.
Oh, it's ridiculous. But then again, I think he struggles to smile and wave and shake hands, if I'm being honest. It's one of those moments where I think he's realised how much was actually done for him
100%.
and how little he actually did. I bet he thought he was really busy doing all this stuff. And in reality, he was just given a colouring book, I imagine, because that's the level that we're dealing with. Because running an international charity is a lot of work.
Yes.
It's a lot of detail. And he's not exactly the details guy. So I always find it weird when they wandered into the charity bit. But like you said, they're using it as a PR exercise to get all the celebrity friends and they get all the photos and all the rest of it. It was never about the people or the causes.
Never.
And I think that's actually quite repugnant, if I'm being honest.
It is. And he's had so much time on his hands, though, Russell, yet none of this has been done properly.
Well, he doesn't exactly do a proper job, does he?
No.
The big question for me with this whole Harry-Meghan thing, and I think some of us have been saying this for a number of years, is what happens when the inevitable happens, which is that they will split
Yes.
up. There is no way this is a sustainable marriage or relationship. It may have been very attractive for probably various reasons at the beginning, but clearly not now. So what happens then? Does he get welcomed back by not just the royal family in Britain without her, possibly so, but will the public have him back?
I don't think so,
Given
no.
how he's trolled the royal family, the stuff he's said about them, the stuff he's written about them, the stuff he's done in terms of bringing the press to task, as you say, he kind of turns the press on and off, doesn't he, depending on whether he needs them, in which case in the past, obviously, he's very much done that, or whether he feels that they're overstepping by simply just talking about the truth and saying, talking about factual stuff. So I'm not sure he gets welcomed back particularly in a particularly enamoured way. And I think
I don't think so now.
it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, because I don't think it's a question of if, it's when.
Yeah, and I don't think, Peter, he can be accepted back because there are certain moments that we will never forget. And for me, I can sort of put it down to 4 key moments. And I genuinely believe the British public will never move on from them. 1, going ahead and accusing the royal family of racism on Oprah Winfrey when Prince Philip was dying in hospital, literally dying. 2, destroying the late Queen's last 2 years when she, and we couldn't say it at the time, but obviously I knew, was battling from a very serious form of cancer herself. 3, being part of that witch hunt against Catherine, the Princess of Wales, when, again, Catherine was secretly undergoing cancer treatment, yet Harry and Meghan's allies were out there trying to spread all of these lies. And then 4, it again relates to King Charles with incurable cancer being put through hell by his youngest son. Yeah. I don't think we ever forget those moments because there's no coming back from them. You can't reverse the fact that you did that at the end, especially of the late Queen's life.
Oh, without a doubt. But for me, I think it's the Catherine one, because let's not forget,
Yes.
Will be king, and I don't think he will ever trust his brother ever again.
No, he won't.
I can't imagine them ever being in a room alone ever again.
It's done.
Yeah,
it's done for William.
Let's not forget that he did also then later deny what he himself
Yes.
said on the Oprah.
Oh no,
interview.
we never said
I
they
didn't
were
say
racist.
anything about racism. But then let's not forget,
We have video.
Can I just suggest a number 5, which is the book? Spare.
Yeah.
I mean, writing a book, so-called warts and all, much of which seems was just exaggerated and made up, not just to expose his family.
You're so right.
And a family that he knows will not normally stand up and defend themselves.
Well, they couldn't.
They don't, right? But he did that
they
out of
couldn't.
spite, but also to make money out of the royal family.
No, you're so right, Russell. Actually, that book, we can never forgive that book.
Available
never
still
forgive that.
at all good bookshops for, I think it's in the 50p bin.
Exactly.
Out the back.
Was it worth it, Harry? Was it worth it? Well, look, on a similar theme, at number 32 of our list of the worst of 2025 was the launch of, let's be honest, the worst TV show in history with Love, Meghan. Let's take a look at just one of the most ridiculous moments of the show as I, alongside a royal superstar panel, reviewed this monstrosity hailed as entertainment.
Let's be blunt from the outset. If this story involved any other public figure, headlines would be screaming marital crisis, breakdown, disappearance. Instead, with Harry and Meghan, it's silence. The suggestion that Prince Harry was mentally unraveling, possibly contemplating leaving Meghan, is not dismissed, corrected, or investigated. It's smothered. And why? Because it collides directly with the carefully protected Sussex narrative, strong marriage mental health champions humanitarian saints. The moment reality threatens that brand, the regime media looks the other way. 3 days. Off-grid. No contact with his wife or children. That alone should have triggered serious questions. But what makes this extraordinary is where and why. Harry didn't just travel for work, he vanished into Botswana to spend time with a woman he calls Mom, a maternal figure from his pre-Meghan life. No Meghan. No press trail. No transparency. For a man obsessed with security, this behavior is reckless at best, alarming at worst. Let's drop the pretense. The panel jokes land because they ring true. This didn't look like duty. It looked like escape. Africa, once again, becomes Harry's emotional refuge, the place he retreats to when life at home collapses. And the Diana cosplay cannot be ignored. Landmines. Charity optics. Spiritual resets. This isn't healing. This is regression. This is where the conversation turns uncomfortable and serious. Harry wandering off. Harry knocking on random doors. Harry disappearing from security protocols. At what point do we stop laughing and start admitting this is a man clearly not coping? Once the nation's cheeky lad, now a walking cautionary tale of emotional dependency, grievance, and poor judgment. You don't need to hate Harry to admit this is tragic. Here's the brutal truth Harry is now facing. He is no longer a working royal, a respected humanitarian, a credible statesman. He is drifting toward irrelevance, and he knows it. That's why backing Andrew, snubbing William, and lashing out at Charles makes no sense strategically. It's emotional chaos, not planning. This is the most damning section of the entire video. Prince Harry, self-styled champion of Africa, sits at the top of a charity accused of rape, abuse, brutality against locals. And yet, silence. No wall-to-wall coverage. No celebrity outrage. No Netflix statements. If this were anyone else, their career would be over. This isn't new. From African parks to Sentebale to Archewell, a pattern emerges. Huge rhetoric. Tiny substance. Minimal oversight. Archewell's own filings exposed how little money actually reached causes. Charity, for the Sussexes, isn't service, it's branding. Here's the irony Harry refuses to acknowledge. The institution he hates protected him. While the palace managed the details, the charities ran smoothly.
Is that not true? I'll come to that in just a moment. It's clearly yet another blow, another slap in the face to the Markle family, to Thomas Markle, who is not mentioned at all during this new series, even though her mum, Doria Ragland, is many, many times. So let me come straight to Samantha Markle. Sam, how do you feel about Meghan saying she is no longer a Markle, no longer using your family name?
Well, one tear left I go. Let me see if I can squeeze one out.
She's good at that.
Uh, no, seriously, I think I should be like depressed. I think our now deceased grandmother would be happy at that because of what she did to the family name. But in jest, I'm going to say that, she had put out there that I quote, only changed my name because she met Harry. So guess what? I think my brother and I are going to change our last name to Sussex. Let's all be Sussexes now.
You've got to love the Markles, don't you? You've got to love the Markles. But I mean, this was an extraordinary moment. First episode of the show, Russell, and it's like, I'm not a Markle. And, Mindy Kaling, how dare you suggest that I am?
I think really just to scupper her, maybe we should all change our names to Sussex so that it's so common that she won't want to use it. But Sussex isn't even the surname, is it? The surname is Windsor.
Exactly. Well, there's been so much debate about this. I mean, Mountbatten, Windsor, yeah. I mean, look at what Andrew ended up becoming.
Yeah.
Because of course the last name is different to your title, although there's debate about that.
And when it comes to having a county as your surname, it basically puts her there in terms of status in Celebville, up there with Joey Essex. Meghan Sussex, Joey Essex.
Give me Joey Essex any day over Meghan Sussex. I refuse to call her that. She's Meghan Markle to me, Peter.
Yeah, I just think she'll always be Meghan Markle. But the thing that really gets me is the amount of money that woman has fleeced out of some major media companies is actually quite impressive. Netflix, Spotify. She had them wrapped around her finger, throwing millions at them.
Idiots.
And I mean, there are some stupid people running these companies, aren't there? Because everyone could see that she was a grifter from the beginning. But I mean, I didn't think she was that bad of an actress when she was in Suits, but looking at that, my God.
Can we just talk about the show? Just the
Please.
The Netflix
How bad
show
was
itself.
it?
It's one of those things. I remember when I was on a certain channel that I'm not on very much anymore, talking about this live on air. Talking about this live on air. It was very evident that obviously this whole thing was fake. So the house that she filmed it in was not her house. The people in the house were not her friends. They were effectively paid employees. The whole thing was a complete and utter setup. And then, of course, the products themselves became hilarious. And I remember saying on that particular channel, I have to watch this. I have to watch these episodes because some of us need to comment on them like you do, like Peter does. But you wouldn't do it out of choice. But in the end, you were watching this stuff almost like it was a parody, almost as if it had been written as something comedic. But the funniest thing for me, the whole thing, out of the whole thing that was the most standout was the fact that she produced the most expensive jam in the world at like $25 a little pot, which actually, I think it was kind of made in wherever. It wasn't kind of homegrown in Meghan Markle's back garden, but it was so bad they couldn't even call it jam.
Legally.
They had to call it fruit spread.
Legally.
So talk about inauthenticity.
It's so tasteless and it's so runny.
Yes.
Because it doesn't have the sugar content.
I think it was crap. It's basically the word I'm looking for.
100%. Did you like the show, Peter?
Oh, again, like we had to watch it, but again, you get sucked into it, don't you? You just hate watching it. You're like, is this going to get worse? Oh, yes, it did get worse. And then it can't get worse. Oh, yes, it doubled down on it again. It was absolutely extraordinary. But she's so lacking in self-awareness to realise that we were hate watching it. We weren't watching it because we were enjoying it. That's the funny bit.
You literally watch it through your fingers like this. It was so cringeable.
And by the time the Christmas special, which of course she's so woke, she doesn't call it a Christmas special. She calls it a holiday celebration because, woke people aren't allowed to actually say that we're celebrating Christmas. By the time that came out, we were all so done with it. People weren't even hate watching anymore. It's one of the biggest flops in Netflix history, and it will not be back. And I think she deserves that. But look, let's move on. At number 31 was a really serious one. The disgusting attack on patriot and then political prisoner Lucy Connolly behind bars from prison staff that left her covered in bruises following being jailed for that one tweet she wrote after the Southport attack that was deleted within hours. This is how I broke the news. She was subjected to the most disgusting treatment behind bars at HMP Peterborough, where she was told unexpectedly that she would have to move to a different wing into a dirty cell covered in feces where someone had recently died. Now, this was a unit designated for the most violent prisoners in the jail. It is a unit where she would have been locked up, or she is locked up, for 23 hours a day. Now, Lucy, who is a gentle, a lovely soul, when she questioned this move,
it was immediately interpreted as her refusing to go. And she was dealt with in an extremely forceful manner. Indeed, the attack by the prison authorities has left her covered in bruises.
Now, in a great credit to him, it was Reform UK's deputy leader, Richard Tice, who went to see Lucy in prison following that attack.
5 days on, I could see clear stress marks and bruises on her wrists from those handcuffs that the officers struggled to get off her hands because they were so tightly struck on. And that was the highest level of restraint and force that officers use. There's two lower levels. Lucy's, she has patently got a good track record in prison. This seems extraordinary maltreatment without any provocation whatsoever that I was absolutely horrified by.
I mean, Russell Quirk, the treatment of Lucy Connolly behind bars was, I believe, part of the deep state trying to shut her up. Now, they failed, and they failed in part because of the support of Reform UK getting on board.
Yeah,
Your
so
party.
Her treatment has been abysmal, and I think our authorities should absolutely hang their heads in shame. She is the archetypal political prisoner. I had the pleasure actually of interviewing her on stage at a Reform event very, very recently. And she spent an hour being actually very open to questions from the audience, which I think was very bold of her because, she's not a media commentator. I know she's on your show a lot now. Thank
She's
goodness.
now on the Superstar panel. But of course, she was an ordinary woman. She was a voice of the people.
She's a
yes, she
childminder.
was.
And actually, those that criticise her, and I had a load of this stuff when I put on to X the next day that I'd interviewed her, and it was a very, very interesting, very fascinating and insightful interview. Lots of people on the left typically saying, but she's far right, she's a proven criminal, she's a racist, she's this, that and the other. When you listen to her story in terms of how she was press ganged, forced, coerced into pleading guilty, you then understand why she pled guilty. I'm telling you, if she had pled not guilty, a jury would have acquitted her, as many juries have acquitted other people in a similar position. I think that she's a force for common sense, a force for good. I think her treatment has been absolutely disgusting. The only sad thing is that because of her conviction, because of her incarceration, she can't stand for reform as a member of parliament. And that's, that doesn't sit well with me at all. So hopefully if reform get into government in 2029, we will change that so that people like Lucy, who have effectively been kind of forced to plead guilty unnecessarily, unfairly, can actually stand and be representatives of the people.
Be abolished. Actually, It should be abolished. Peter C. Barnes, what did you make of the Lucy Connolly
for
story?
me, it's a lightning rod moment. I think that's where the real divide in the nation showed between those with common sense and those that are on the side of authority and totalitarianism. And I think what I really liked was the fact that she came out of that prison with a mission. And she's not let it go. I watched that brilliant interview that you did, and I thought I thought she was going to be this little meek woman, really beaten down, and all the rest of it. But absolutely not. She came out with full barrels loaded, and she has not let it go since. And I admire her for that because I think that the authorities picked on the wrong woman. Because the one thing you don't do is make somebody sympathetic. If you're going to hold somebody up as a terrible person, don't make them the charming one who's quite nice and lovely, and he's your neighbour or it's your mum or something like that. It was stupid what they did, but again, it was that moment where, again, it was like, how are they this stupid? And what country have we turned into where putting a woman in prison for 31 months was the sensible thing to do whilst we let a sex attacker out through the front door with taxpayer money?
What was very notable talking to her as well, apart from the way that she was forced into that guilty plea, not given proper legal advice and so on, was the difference between when she was first arrested and the police were lovely, apparently very courteous, very professional and respectful. And then they released her on bail and then came back and arrested her a few days later and were insistent on being not only increasing the level of charge, but also, she said, they handled her in a much more aggressive and robust way in terms of the arrest, how they dealt with her in the custody suite and how they dealt with her when she was then in the cells for the next few days. It was very, very clear that someone from above, yes, the
deep
Labour
state
government,
were in
Labour
charge.
government, and Lord, whatever his name was, Helmer?
Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, Starmer's best friend.
Yes, they had then got involved, and you can just imagine these words being said from Starmer to Hermer and then back down to whoever was in charge
and then
of her.
the then Home Secretary Yvette
incarceration.
Cooper
And
as
Yvette
well,
Cooper.
not
And
letting her out of prison.
And those words would have been this: make an example of her. And that's what they did. Hence, she's a political prisoner.
Yeah, she did the worst thing you could do. She embarrassed them. And they don't like it when you do that. They're very egotistical, driven people. And that's literally the worst thing you can do.
They want us all to shut up, don't they? But
Yeah.
the great thing is, we're not shutting up.
The moment Harry went solo, everything collapsed. Because smiling, waving, and photo ops are not leadership. The panel says what many think but few dare say aloud. This marriage is not sustainable. The real question isn't if they split, it's when. And if they do, Harry faces a nightmare scenario. Distrusted by William. Unforgiven by the public. Exposed as disloyal. There is no reset button. This is the point of no return. Racism accusations while Prince Philip lay dying. Poisoning the Queen's final years. Allowing Catherine to be targeted during cancer treatment. Tormenting a king battling cancer. These aren't PR mistakes. They're moral ruptures. The public doesn't forget moments like these. Spare wasn't brave. It was vindictive. A money-making betrayal of a family that cannot fight back publicly. That book cemented Harry's reputation not as a truth-teller, but as a man willing to burn everything for cash. Then came the Netflix catastrophe. Fake house. Paid friends. Overpriced fruit spread masquerading as jam. And the most revealing moment. I'm not Meghan Markle. I'm Sussex. A rejection of her own family name while exploiting a royal title she claims to despise. The audience didn't love watch it. They hate-watched it until they stopped watching altogether. One of Netflix's biggest flops. By the so-called holiday special, even mockery dried up. No interest. No outrage. Just indifference. The worst fate for any celebrity. The final section exposes a far bigger issue. A woman jailed for a tweet brutally handled, bruised, humiliated while violent criminals walk free. Whether you agree with her views or not, the treatment described is chilling. This is what happens when the state decides to make an example of someone. And the public noticed. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe the media deliberately shields Harry and Meghan? African parks should be front-page news. Harry has crossed too many lines to ever return. Britain is sliding into a two-tier justice system. Comment below, don't hold back. Like if this breakdown said what others won't. Subscribe for fearless, uncensored commentary. Share this with someone who still believes the Sussex myth. Agree or disagree, just don't stay silent.